Well, it is officially springtime right now, isn't it? Has anybody done any spring cleaning yet? Who's done some spring cleaning? Okay, who loves spring cleaning? Who's like excited about it? Okay, who does not like spring cleaning? Okay, who doesn't like cleaning but you're glad after you do it? This morning, we're going to do a little bit of spring cleaning, but we're going to do some spring cleaning on our souls. Are you ready? You're like, no, I don't want to be here. I'm gone. There's the door. No, we're doing some spring cleaning today, and Jesus does some spring cleaning. Well, it wasn't necessarily in the spring, but he does some cleaning of the temple, which we're going to be looking at that story today. But my wife, she loves cleaning, and just a real quick cleaning story from her real quick. She's a purger. Anybody a purger that just gets rid of stuff? Okay, I gotta watch her because she will get rid of stuff and I don't know it's gone. Last year we were driving through a small town that was about 25-30 minutes away from our house, and I was like, we should go to that thrift store. There's a new thrift store in town. We should go to it. And she's like, no, I don't think we should go to the thrift store. And I'm like, she loves going to the thrift store. Why would she not want to go to the thrift store? That's kind of weird. And I'm like, no, we should go to the thrift store. She's like, okay, we go to the thrift store. We start going through the thrift store, and I start looking through the racks. That's my shirt. How did that get here? I keep going. There's another one of my shirts. How'd that get here? I found out she took a bunch of my shirts to the thrift store. Anyways, she purged my closet, which probably needed to happen. Let's be honest. They were probably stained shirts. They were stained shirts or ripped shirts. I had emotional attachments. I get the reputation of being the hoarder. I'm not really a hoarder, but she's a purger, but she makes me better, which is great. So, but we're talking about this idea, this concept that cleaning isn't necessarily fun, but we're glad after we do it. And my goal for today is for us to do some spring cleaning and to examine our own lives. But before we get there, I got to rewind a little bit. We got to go backwards a little bit, and I got to do a little bit of teaching before I get into some more preaching. What was the temple of the Lord? It's important for you to know this before we head into this message today, because Jesus goes and he cleans out the temple. But if you don't know what the temple is, there's less power of this message. So we got to do a little bit of context of what the temple was. God, before he lives inside of us as the believers, he lived in the tabernacle, in specifically the Ark of the Covenant, as you read the Old Testament, if you've read that before. But then the temple was built by the third king of Israel, King Solomon. He built this grand temple that was later destroyed, and then it was rebuilt again 500 years later, and then King Herod remodeled it 20 years before Jesus to look more Roman-esque in sense. But the big thing with the temple is that you got to understand that that it was the dwelling place for God's presence. Everybody say dwelling place. The temple was the dwelling place for God's presence. Now, Maggie talked about it real briefly, and you can get more into it, but there was this sacrificial system where animals were brought to the temple that were sacrificed for the forgiveness of sin. Could you imagine if you had to bring animals and kill them up here on the altar here at church in order for your sins to be forgiven? That's kind of weird, right? But that's what it was, is that God had commanded, that he made laws that in order to be forgiven of your sin, you had to bring certain types of animals to the temple where the priests would slaughter them on the altar. Now, the temple had a lot of different parts to it. There was the Holy of Holies, which priests only went into once a year, and that was where the presence of God lived. That's where the Ark of the Covenant was, the Holy of Holies. There was the holy place, the area for priests to perform daily rituals like burning incense and tending. And then there was the court of priests, where the priests offered sacrifices. There was the court of Israel, where the Jewish men were to worship and to pray. And then there was the court of women, where women were to worship and to pray. But then this bigger area out here, and the reason I wanted to put this up on the screen was because this is known as the court of the Gentiles. Now, if you don't know what a Gentile is, it's anyone who is non-Jewish. So most of us in the room are probably Gentiles, okay? But this was the area where the non-Jewish people could come to the temple and could pray. This is where our story takes place today, is in this court of the Gentiles. Because what had happened is instead of it being a place where people could come worship, where people could come pray, it became a marketplace where people were selling things, not just selling things, but unethically selling things. What do I mean? They were raising the prices really high. Because it's the product price promotion. If you know the marketing, they're like, we can put the prices way up and people will buy it. And so I don't know if you've ever been to a foreign country, Canada, anywhere that has a different currency than us. But if you're in the airport, don't ever get your money exchanged there because they're going to give you a bad rate, right? It's going to be too high of a rate. That's what they were doing, They were doing money exchange because people were coming from all over to the temple. They were pilgrims that would come to the temple to make these sacrifices, and they were giving them bad rates on the exchange of their money. And they were also selling, overcharging things like for the doves, which doves were actually the animal that the poor people would make the sacrifice for because they couldn't afford the other animals. And so they were actually overcharging poor people for doves. Oh, that's bad. Just yesterday, I had the opportunity to go to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I do this every year with my dad. We've got a group of 10 of us that hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And so I actually, yesterday morning, woke up at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I hiked up 4,500 feet elevation, drove 4 hours to the airport, flew on 2 planes, got here last night, and I'm here this morning. But the reason I bring it up, and if you want to see pictures, I'll show you pictures. But the reason I bring it up is because the night before the hike, I forgot to bring snacks. And so normally I bring granola bars and I bring snacks and stuff, but I forgot. And so we go to the town that's right next to the Grand Canyon. We go into the store to buy some snacks. Candy bars were $6. Water bottles were $8 for a water bottle. And I'm like, But that's what they were doing in the temple of God that was designed for worship. It's one thing if you're just charging tourists at the Grand Canyon. It's another thing if you're preventing people from entering into the presence and the worship of God. Jesus is mad. And so we're going to read 2 different examples of what happens. Well, we're going to talk about first one's recorded in John's gospel, and it's at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. It's right after the wedding at Cana where he turned the water into wine, and it's during the Passover. All of these things happen during the Passover, which is the festival celebrating what Maggie talked about at communion. It's where the Jews celebrated this idea that they put the blood over the doorposts and that the angel passed over them. That's why they call it Passover. But during Passover, is when this story happens, and Jesus, he makes a whip. He creates a whip, and he begins running into the temple, chasing and yelling and throwing the temple tables over. And he's mad, he's yelling at people, and he goes up to the people selling the doves, and he says, "Get these things out of here and stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace." He's mad. He's righteously angry. Stop it. What are you doing? And then 3 years later, he does it again. Some of you might have only known that he did it one time. No, 3 years later, he actually does the same thing again, and it's recorded in all 3 of the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and it's at the end of Jesus' ministry. It's actually right after his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and it was also during Passover. Matthew 21, verse 12, we're going to read this one. It says, Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling the doves. He said to them, "Scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." He's angry. Now, before we go any further, there's some powerful symbolism taking place here that we need to be aware of. Jesus knew full well that the temple of God, that the presence of God was no longer going to be in the temple, but it was going to be inside of our hearts. And this is a symbolism that he's going into here, because the temple is no longer the place where God dwells because of what Jesus is about to do on that cross. You see, Jesus, as we talked about, was the ultimate sacrifice, that instead of bringing animals to get sacrificed, Jesus does one big sacrifice for all of humanity and of all time. And that's why he's called the Lamb of the world. So today, the Spirit of God no longer lives in the temple, but the Spirit of God lives in you. The Spirit of God lives in us. And so the church, the temple is more than this place. It's more than this building. It's us. It's wherever we go. And so we got to look at this story through that lens, through that context, that Jesus knew that was going to happen. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, don't you realize that all of you together are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God lives in you? So there's so many things that we can learn from our message today, and I just want to pull out 3 things for us today. First one is Jesus disciplines us. Jesus disciplines us. You're like, wow, thanks. I'm glad I came to church today. Whew. Good point, Pastor. Ugh. You know, Jesus talks a lot about love. He talks about turning the other cheek. But here we see a different side of Jesus' love, don't we? This isn't the side of Jesus that's talked about very frequently, because this is the side of Jesus that is bringing judgment. It's bringing correction by disciplining. You know, discipline isn't bad. Discipline's actually really good. In the sports world, if you're playing football, okay, those of you that don't know, I walked on, played football at University of Oregon. When I was on the football team, if the coaches disciplined me, like they were watching me and they corrected me, that was a really good thing. Because what did that mean? That meant that they saw potential in me. That meant that they wanted me to be better, that they cared about me. When the coaches didn't correct you, that was the problem. Then it was like, man, you're just a walk-on, which I was a walk-on. So I didn't get corrected by coaches very often. But but when a coach corrects you, it's actually a good thing. It's a positive thing. Sometimes the most loving thing is discipline. Sometimes that's the most loving thing. But the Bible says, for the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his own child. There was a time where I had to do some discipline. There's a lot of time in teaching and in coaching, and different times I've had to do discipline. But I won't use his real name. I'll use Aaron as his name. But there was a student that was in our college program that broke a rule. He did something he was not supposed to do. And he was training to be a pastor. And I remember, the easy thing for me would have been to just ignore it. Just let him, say, sorry, slap on the wrist. But I remember I sat him down in my office and I said, you're going to not be on the worship team for 3 months. And we're going to put you on probation. That was hard for me. It would have been way easier to not discipline him. But I was like, you know what? I love him enough. I love him enough to say, I know this is going to be embarrassing for you. I know that people are going to think bad things about you. I know that this is going to be hard for you, but I love you so much that I'm going to take you off the worship team for 3 months. And he was livid. He goes upstairs into our church lobby and starts telling people I said stuff that I didn't say, and he starts smearing my name in the mud, and he's mad and he's angry, and can I tell you though, 3 months later, he served his time, and his attitude shifted, his attitude changed. God radically shifted his mind. It was a repentant moment eventually that happened, and he ended up repenting. And then one of our students that actually came and visited me over Christmas break this year was him. Aaron and a friend came out and visited, and I thought this guy was going to hate me forever. I thought he was just never going to talk to me again. But he now we have a great relationship, and he looks back and he says, "Thank you for loving me enough to discipline me. Thank you for loving me enough to discipline me." Jesus has a deep love, and that's why he runs into the temples and throws over the tables. He has a passionate love for people. And that's my second point, is that Jesus is passionate. The disciples even talk about it in verse 17 and in the Gospel of John. It says, "Then the disciples remembered this prophecy from scriptures, passion for God's house will consume me." This is actually a fulfilling of an Old Testament biblical prophecy that Jesus, the Messiah, would have passion that would consume him. You know, a word that's in some translations is zeal. Everybody say zeal. I love the word zeal. I just think that's a really cool word. And it means enthusiastic passion, devotion to a cause. Jesus had zeal to cleanse out the temple, and Jesus has a zeal to clean out our temples today. Why did Jesus have so much zeal? Why did Jesus have so much passion? Because he loved the people. He loved the people. And he didn't want to see the Gentiles not able to come into the house of worship and be able to worship. That there was a barrier that was preventing people from encountering the presence of God. And he had love for those people. It's okay to be passionate. It's okay to have passion. You know, things change when we have passion, doesn't it? When we have passion, we care a whole lot. We care a lot. We think whatever things we're passionate about, we think about all the time. Whether that's your boat, going boating or fishing, or whether that's duck football. Passion. We think about it more, don't we? It increases our energy. Our emotions get stronger. We have more conviction. What are things that you're passionate about? Are you passionate about hiking? I'm passionate about hiking. I just hiked the Grand Canyon yesterday. What are spending time with your family? Maybe you've got a new grandbaby or a new family member in your family. Those are things that are exciting. You can get passionate about those things. Or maybe it's your job. You love your work and you're passionate about your work. There's nothing wrong with those things. There's nothing wrong about getting passionate about those things. But here's my question for us today, though, is how do we increase our passion for the things of God? I'm gonna ask that question again. How do we increase our passion for the things of God? Well, one of the things we can do is we can pray. We can pray. Here are some things that you can pray this week. God, would you help me be passionate for you? Pray that prayer this week. You wake up every day and you say, God, help me be passionate for things of you. Would you help me be passionate to worship you? One of the guys I hiked with this week, his name's Brad. He's been a family friend for a lot of years. And he's been a small group leader at his church and just a great spiritual mentor leader. And he was excited I was a lead pastor. And he said, you know what, Rob, you need to do? You need to get people passionate about worship. He's like, get them excited to worship me. Well, not worship me, worship God. Get them excited. He's like, if you do anything, that's all you need to do. Just get people excited to worship. But I just thought that was an interesting word for our church. We got to get excited. We got to get passionate. We got to have zeal to worship. And I love seeing that today as we were worshiping, as we were raising our hands, and as we were lifting up Jesus' name. I saw passion. I saw zeal for worship. And so great job with that. But we got to have passion for purity in our own lives. We got to have passion for purity. It can't just be, purity. We got to be clean. We got to get rid of sin. Passion for getting rid of the sin. Jesus didn't come into the temple and just kind of go, guys, hey, maybe you shouldn't think about doing that. No, he threw over the temple tables. He was passionate. What is the temple, what is the thing in your heart that Jesus is wanting to throw over? If Jesus came into your soul right now, what would he want to throw over? We got to get passionate about it. Passion for purity. You gotta say, God, would you help me? Would you help me be passionate for purity? Would you help me be passionate for the church? Would you help me be passionate for people who are far from you? Give me a passion. It's okay to be passionate. Jesus had passion. We can have passion too. And here's the cool part. This is the exciting part. Jesus helps us. And that's my third point. Jesus helps us clean up the temple. You know, cleaning, unless you're one of those weird people that thinks cleaning is fun, cleaning isn't a lot of fun, is it? But we're always glad after we do it. We're always so glad. I mean, if I clean my truck, I just I got to vacuum it out. I got to clean my truck. But then when I get in my truck on Monday morning and it's a nice, clean truck on my way to work, I'm so glad after I did it. Examining our hearts and examining our lives, it's not a lot of fun, but we're so glad after we do it. You know, you don't have to clean up your life before starting a relationship with Jesus. And here's why. Because he comes into your life and he helps you clean up the mess. He helps you. He does it with you. I don't like spring cleaning, but I like it a lot more if I do it with other people. It's a lot more fun when you have other people that do it with you. And Jesus wants to come in and help you clean up your mess. He doesn't just sit there and go, you need to clean up the temple. No, he actually came into the temple and started throwing stuff around, right? He came into it. And so Jesus helps us clean up stuff. And same with baptisms. We got on Easter, we are doing baptisms, and you can get signed up for those, but you don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to have your life completely cleaned up to get signed up for water baptism. That's a symbol of you're starting the journey. You're beginning the journey. You're saying, I choose to say yes to you, and Jesus can come into our lives, and he's the one that can clean us up. He doesn't ask us to do it alone. But I'll ask this question again. If he were to walk into our souls today, what would he throw over? Have you heard of the laws of thermodynamics? The second law of thermodynamics states things naturally tend to fall into chaos, and energy or effort is needed to keep things organized or functioning properly. In other words, what does it mean? It means that things are just going to naturally drift towards messiness unless some sort of outside force or energy is acted upon it. Jesus is that outside force or energy that can come into our lives, that can help us get cleaned up. Here's some questions that you can pray for this week. Jesus, what things do I need to change in my life? Oh, it's a hard question to ask. What attitude or action am I doing that is not of you? What am I doing that could be preventing me from worshiping you? And then this is one of the most powerful prayers you can ask is say, Jesus, would you help me clean up the mess? Would you help me? Would you take away the sin? And he does every time. Jesus helps us, but what's our part? I like how Paul, when he writes to the Roman church, Romans 12:1, he says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies. Everybody say bodies. Give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. We don't need to bring animals to the altar to sacrifice and to slaughter anymore because Jesus did that for us. But what we are instructed to do here in the Romans is to bring our whole body, not as a dead sacrifice, but as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. And this is truly the way that we worship. We offer our whole selves. You see, what Jesus wants to do for us is better than what we want for ourselves. What Jesus wants for us is better than what we want for ourselves. That's pretty cool. He knows us better than we know ourselves. And he wants what's best for you. So how do we live this out? We love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind. It's the greatest commandment. Greatest commandment. We got to help people maybe when we don't feel like helping them. We got to say, I don't really feel like helping them right now, but we got to help them anyway. We got to live the right way, even though it might not make sense to us logically. We might go, I don't really understand why I'm supposed to live that way, but we choose to live that way anyway. Maybe there's something this week. Even as I'm speaking, as I'm talking about cleansing the temple, maybe there's something that you need to get rid of this week. You need to take it and you need to throw it in the trash. I don't know what that is, but maybe there's something in your life that's been preventing you from worshiping. Maybe you got to go to counseling to save your marriage. Or maybe you just even the first step of coming to our marriage hacks class, which will help with your marriage, give you some helpful tips on how to have a better relationship with your spouse. Maybe you go to Celebrate Recovery to get help with your hurts, habits, and hangups. But we've got to surrender our whole self to God. Why? Because of what Jesus did for us. And Jesus doesn't ask us to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself, because Jesus gave him his whole self for us. He went to that cross. He didn't just give half of himself. He didn't just give 80% of himself, but he went to a cross and was murdered. He was tortured to death because he gave him his whole self for us. And so in response to that, we can't help but to give our whole self for him and say, God, my whole life, it's my act of worship. I'm giving it all to you because of what you did for us. I'm going to invite the worship team back up. We're going to have some time to respond to this message. I know it's deep. I know it's heavy. Some of you are sitting there and you're like, wow, that was a lot. Here's to come back around to the main points, okay? The main thing is Jesus disciplines us. Why? Because he loves you. Jesus has a passion for people. Why? Because he loves you. Jesus comes and helps you clean up your mess. Why? Because he loves you. There's the message. That's it. He disciplines us, he has a passion for us, and he helps us clean. Why? Because he loves us. And what do we do about it? Because of his great love for us, because of what he did on that cross for us, we can't help but to say, God, we're gonna give all of ourselves to you. And you gotta pray and ask him for help sometimes. Sometimes you can't do it on your own, but you gotta take some intentional time. Your homework this week is to take some intentional time to pray and to ask some of those hard questions of the Lord, to say, God, what is it in my heart? What is it in my life that I need to get rid of this week? God, would you help me have more passion for the things of you? If you guys want to stand with me. Each and every week we fill out a connection card, and this is just a practical way that we respond to the truth of God's word. You can share wins on the connection card. You can share prayer requests on the connection card. You can just be writing something that maybe God put on your heart to write down, but I read these each and every week, and we have a digital option as well if you'd like to fill it out digitally. But I change the responses every week because I want you to respond every week. And so here's some boxes you can check today. The first one is I choose to follow Jesus. And in parentheses next to it, it says, I choose to let Jesus come in and clean up my life. And if that's you and you've never given your life to Jesus, if you've never said, Jesus, I want you to come and help me clean up my life, if that's you, check that box, and we're going to celebrate with you this week. And we're going to get you resources. We're going to get you information and help you along the journey as you start this journey of faith. And then the second box is I admit my life is pretty messed up right now. Maybe that's you. And you got to say, I need some spring cleaning. I confess, I got to clean some stuff up. The third one is I want to have a new passion for God this week. I want new passion for God this week. And then the last one is I'm so glad that Jesus helps me again and again and again. And to celebrate in a prayer of thanks there. But fill those out. We've got the bins in the back, and we'd love to connect with you the connection card way. But there's more than just responding with the connection card. We're going to respond with worship. You can sit if you want to sit. You can stand if you want to stand. You can pray if you want to pray. You can sing if you want to sing. But I want in this next moment, as we enter into this time of worship, do whatever it is that you need to do to let Jesus in and do some cleaning. It's time for some spring cleaning. I'm praying the prayers myself. God, would you clean me from the inside out? Let's pray. God, we come before you, and we just thank you that your presence is here in this place. And God, we thank you that you had great love for the people in the temple that day. And God, you have great love for us as the temple is no longer this location where your spirit dwells, but God, that the temple is now us. It's this church, and it's each one of us that have given our lives to you. And so God, I pray that we would have the same passion that you had for the temple in the story today. God, I pray that we would have the same passion for the temple in our hearts. And God, I pray that we would pray prayers that say, God, would you reveal to us what is it in us that is not of you? And God, would you help us clean it up? Would you take it away? Thank you for your grace. Thank you for forgiveness. Thank you that you wash us white as snow, Jesus. But God, would you help us? In your name we pray. Amen. Let's worship.
I know a name.